Alright, Path of Exile players, let's go over what are the best everythings in terms of the bases for items. And to kind of explain why this is the most important thing is you're going to need to watch this to understand maybe what to start crafting. You really want to get what's called a good base. This can have to do with the item level or what the base of the item is. For example, the emerald rings will always have this accuracy rating. There's an exception if you do happen to roll something with a Vol orb, and then that can change. Like a lazuli ring will always have certain things. Let's go ahead and actually go over rings first, because I think this is one of the most important things that people may not factor in. So when it comes to Path of Exile, unlike Diablo, the base name of the item will dictate what the item will pretty much always have. Again, the one exception would be Vol ring. Well, if you were to Vol any sort of item here, it would randomly roll something. So for starters, let's go over, like I said, rings. So we're looking at what to start utilizing to craft on. And one thing that is really huge with this is when you start searching, because Path of Exile 2 doesn't have pseudo searching at the moment, when you use certain implicits, like for example the prismatic rings, this is all what has to do with the base. You can see over here, if I was to use some sort of weighted sum based on resistances, it's only going to be adding these two. It won't count this extra plus 10 to all elemental resistances, which would actually make this item, using the sum of giving us resistances, actually plus an additional 30. So this ring would actually have 81 resistances in total, and then you'd also get like that huge chunk of HP and extra mana regen, which would make this a really good ring. But it makes it even better because of the implicit. So the point of this video is to show you guys and understand what makes an item actually even better. Even though you may use a search feature, you might not realize that you can get a better deal on something. So what the point of this video is to really go over is it's essentially called the implicit, but people also use the term the base of the ring, because you want to start crafting, you're going to need to know what is a good base, what certain mods can roll on certain rings, as well as item level. But we won't get into much into the item level because this could extend the video unnecessarily long. Just want to go over like the basis of them and go over which ones are the best. So for starters, I'm going to go ahead and do rings at the start. So what's the best ring? Now, some of the best rings will really come down to just giving you resistances, to be honest. Getting chaos resistance is absolutely key in Path of Exile 2, and unfortunately, since we don't have blessed orbs, it's kind of more rough to get the highest roll when you look for the implicit on certain things. So basically what it comes down to is in the very, very earlier stages, iron rings, if you're doing a like attack build, this is definitely going to give you the biggest advantage in the early stages of the game. Later though, resistances are going to be pretty much king in most circumstances. However, increased cast speed is still good, so a pearl ring could be good for a lot of different builds as well. And pretty much what it comes down to is the prismatic, as well as any of the resistance rings, are going to be probably what you're going for. Sure, there could be some sort of niche build that like you want to stack as much maximum mana, or you want to get as much fire res as possible, because then you want to do maximum fire res. But as far as what I would say is the best ring, again, unless you're doing something super unique where you need that additional skill slot, most of the time it's going to come down to end game. You want resistances. Cast speed is okay too. Well, there is also technically this like increased rarity of items, where if you really want to min-max in terms of getting some like magic find, that could be an option, but for the most part, this is what you're going to go for. Unfortunately, we don't have steel rings, which is kind of like the upgraded version of the iron ring in PoE 1. They don't have it out yet. But if that ever gets added, iron ring, even though you might think it's only 1 to 4 damage, it's minor. When you start scaling all these percentages, it does kind of add up. But again, you're going to get more bang for your buck by just going for, again, another resistance. Now, as far as amulet goes, there are a lot of actually good amulets in the game. The only one that's like what I would consider is like really bad is pretty much the small amount of life regen. It is so minor that it is basically skippable because it doesn't really scale. But getting all of this like stuff to main stat is really good, because there's a lot of builds where based on this amount of intelligence, dexterity, you can get extra attack speed or whatever the case may be. Getting any of the attributes are actually pretty dang good. Azure Amulet is great as well, just giving you some sort of mana regen in the earlier stages, or again, all attributes is great. One thing that I think a lot of builds will try to favor though, if you can fit it in, and another thing I want to mention really quick, as far as like the Bloodstone Amulet, I would really recommend you guys to get a Amber Amulet if you're looking to get maximum life, because 1 strength equals 2 HP, which means that an Amber Amulet will almost give you the same amount of max life, but it'll also facilitate those strength requirements to maybe add in an extra like gem that you normally would have to get like an extra point or two on the skill tree to actually give you that amount of extra bonuses from the passive tree. So this could be okay too. But as far as what a lot of people want and like the high end stuff, again, unless you're doing Magic Find, I'm not going to talk too much about Magic Find because people just want survivability and damage at the end of the day, most of the time. I'm going to go over like kind of what most people would want. The best base I would say that is going to give you the most in terms of like value is probably going to be your Solar Amulet. This can enable basically an extra aura. Essentially, you can get extra life regen, extra mana. This is really big. Now technically, if you're running Clarity, you can just run something like the Yugioh Amulet, and then you would get that extra 30% mana regen. So keep that in mind as well. I know a lot of people are having mana issues. We just dropped the video on a mana guide, but like if you were to compete with, let's say, Clarity, where it does require you to run Spirit as well, you can kind of swap these in and out. But Solar Amulet is kind of what I would say is the most premium one out of all of the amulets in terms of the amulet slot. As far as the belt goes, what's the best base? So I would say the thing that's going to be up majority of the time that some people can utilize, even if you're playing an evasion-based build, I really enjoy the plate belt. The reason why I really like the plate belt, if we look at what's basically on the items in terms of the prefixes and suffixes, getting armor to roll 2 times is good. You can get, anywhere, depending on your build and what stage you're at, anywhere from in the earlier stages of the game, maybe even getting like 20% damage reduction from physical is great, especially if you're a high evasion based build. You're not going to really have any armor to scale, and a lot of the belts don't give some insane stat. There's no Stygian Vise as the base, which would be the greatest thing ever if you could craft on that. PoE 2, we don't have the Stygian Vise, so that was a belt that essentially had like a gem socket that you can kind of put in. But as far as it goes, a lot of these have to do with like the charms, and unfortunately they're really stingy on allowing us to kind of keep these charm effects up 100% of the time. Sure, that if you are doing a build that can absolutely blast, you can kind of upkeep some of these charges, like the ones where give you extra magic find, but a lot of these charm effects, they activate when you are frozen, when you are bleeding, and when you are stunned. They'll kind of prevent you from it. But a lot of times what happens is you're going to have to require these on a very harder boss fight that you want to have it up on. But the problem is that these simply don't build enough charges in that duration. Even if you had like reduced charms used over here or increased charges gained, realistically to upkeep them is very, very difficult. That's why I've been saying plate belts are kind of the go-to. But again, if you're playing a very specific build, that like, you can keep it up 100% of the time because you have all these other durations of certain things, whether it's like flask charges used, gain, all those things. Sure, it's more niche, but I think majority of people, they would prefer Stygian Vise if it did exist. But increased rarity is, again, more of like a premium stat, so I would say that that one could be something to look at for some people, even though I didn't want to go too much into Magic Find because, again, like I said, most people just want survivability. Even getting a small amount, even just 2-3% damage reduction, it's better than a lot of these other options at the moment. Again, unless you're doing some sort of niche thing where you can 100% upkeep your charms, it's just too hard to keep these up. As far as gloves go, this is where there's really not that many implicits. At the end of the day, there's a lot of these golden things that aren't even added into the game yet, so technically these were data mined. But as far as it goes on like gloves, there's not a implicit that's really good, so whatever like your build can benefit off of, so that would be either energy shield or armor. Keep in mind on the passive tree, there are so many things where it's like based off of like your gloves, you can get extra evasion rating. There's some sort of like hybrid energy shield and evasion like items for like helmets. There's not really like an absolute go-to for the gloves. So this one I'm going to say like, sorry, there really isn't like anything where I could say you definitely want to try to go for these. It's just whatever you're playing, whether it's energy shield, evasion, just get the one that can be the highest. Now, how it works in Path of Exile 2 is they kind of have tiers. It starts off on like the base, so this would be like intricate gloves, then there's advanced intricate gloves, and then there's the expert ones. Basically, these work in tiers, and then these will have a specific like item level, or it will have a level requirement for them, and then depending on if it's evasion rating, which will require more dexterity to equip them, that's basically all that is. There's really nothing here. Same thing with the boots, honestly. Again, these golden items don't exist anymore. Well, they don't exist at the moment. Now, there is some stuff with the chess pieces. So, obviously, you choose whatever that you would want to go for. If golden, again, these aren't actually in the game yet. Otherwise, I would say, yeah, getting 25 to all res is pretty dang big. The stats on the item are mediocre, minus that. But that's not in the game yet. Now, some of them can have some play, like the Abyssal Krios over here. These can give you some amount of life regen as a percent. This could be actually kind of useful for some builds. There's also another few sets of things that I think is actually really good, and I was actually running these. The Pathfinder coat, this one gives you reduced slowing potency debuffs on you. That's actually pretty good. There are so many different ways that Path of Exile likes to slow you down, so I actually think this one's pretty good. The difference between running this and the highest evasion one, which is the studded vest, is a little bit of evasion rating. Like it does add up when you start adding all these evasion rating percentages, and then you throw in the different runes to make it go even higher. But this is not a bad stat at all, and the Expert Serpent Scale is also something I could recommend. This is reducing the amount of like threshold. Well, maybe I should just read it here. So a higher element threshold makes it less likely when you're hit by an elemental damage that'll apply the freeze, shock, or whatever. So it's going to be harder for you to get kind of affected by those. At the end of the day, you would probably want immunities, or you'd have some sort of charm, but this can kind of help out a little bit. So if you want to, I would say that in the evasion-based builds, you can run Serpent Scale, Pathfinder, or Studded Vest. And then there's also ones which will give you increased mana regen. So there is some other ones like Expert Rogue Armor is kind of nice because it's a hybrid, but most people want to take the node if you're an evasion based build to get like the double like amount of evasion rating on your chest piece, but it's still not bad. I mean, just having the ability to have some of these implicits like 80 life, that is awesome. So consider that as well. Especially if you're running a build that may just convert all that evasion rating to armor anyways, then hey, getting an extra 80 life, especially in the earlier stages, isn't bad. And there are other things which can give you spirit, maximum elemental resistances is kind of nice over here. So there are a little bit of ones that I'm mentioning over here. Some of them just straight up don't have any. And then we have this increased movement speed in case there's any build that can scale movement speed to damage, as Path of Exile is a very unique game. Now, as far as the other like weapons in the game, they kind of give you some sort of special thing, like the Volatile one will give you Volatile Dead. They will grant you some sort of skill. So this one I can't say, oh, I recommend this is the best in slot. It just kind of depends. Do you want to use this skill? If not, well, it may matter. Certain times there are certain items that can only roll certain like mods on them, and they will have to be a very specific level in order to add any of these prefixes or suffixes. But as far as I'm aware of, like, there isn't any one that I can say, oh man, I absolutely recommend running like a Galvanic one. Obviously, it just gives you the skill, so it kind of ties into that. Now, as far as the quarterstaffs, there is one that gives you a block chance. There's increased range over here. But as far as this goes, I would say those can matter, but it's not like absolutely like a force thing. There is one exception that we will get into. As far as like the mauls over here, these two-handed maces, keep in mind we don't have like a lot of the weapons yet, like daggers and stuff. Technically, I could show you those, but those are data mined, so I don't know if there's really a point. I liked the Crumbing Maul, like as far as what it can do. It has this causes enemies to explode on critical kill for 10% of their life as physical damage. Explodey chest was like one of the coolest things that we got in Harvest League, which had 100%, and then like basically nerfed that thing to the ground and just kept on nerfing the percents. And then we don't have like an item like Impulsa sadly anymore in PoE 2 yet, but I think that this is kind of a cool effect. But I'm not going to say that there's like an absolute like must. There one exception is, which we'll get into in a moment here. As far as the scepters go, these will grant you like Skeletal Warrior. They also grant you Spirit. And as far as it goes, yeah, that's definitely something to take into consideration if you are playing like a minion build. Yeah, you definitely want those extra sources of spirit, or if you're running a build that just wants a lot of like auras activated, that can be good. So there, a lot of those they really didn't matter that much. Now it does matter on the bow. Okay, so like in PoE 1 it was all about like the thicket bow, or there was like some other, I think it was like Harbinger. There was a couple of bows that would give you a high base on your critical strike chance. So a lot of these, I don't know if it shows here, some of these may have like a higher base on crit. So again, these ones don't matter as much. It's just with bows that matters a lot. The specific one is the dual string family. So what the dual string family bows do as the implicit is the bow attacks fire additional arrow. This is massive. This for some builds is literally double your damage, going from 1 arrow to 2, if it can shotgun, if it can return, if it can explode and overlap. There's a lot of different builds that will definitely make great great use out of the dual string bow. There's also like warden bow that gives you an additional chain, which, I mean, it's a chance to do it, but is there anything even close to that? Hell no, man. Your top tier bow right here, and the thing that is going to give you money is going to be the expert dual string bow. It's literally just because of this. Now, it doesn't matter that the other bows could have a little bit more damage. This over here is absolute king for like 99% of bow builds. If you want your premium damage, if you want the premium clear speed, it just comes down to this. Now, you can also roll additional arrows on bows. There is a, I believe it is a suffix. If we go to like the modifiers and calculator, it is bow attacks fire additional arrow. It can roll 1 to 2. And if you're wondering what these numbers are, this is a great website, by the way. It's PoE2DB. .tw. This is one of the greatest sites here, but getting some of these, this number over here, I believe is the level requirement for it. And then as far as the weights go, we don't know the weights yet. This is something that is still not released. So hopefully when that comes out, you'll be able to see kind of like what are your chances of getting, you know, these sort of things. Usually what it comes down to is the more of whatever stat you're looking for is just going to have a lower chance to go ahead and roll. But again, going over the bows, there is definitely a winner here, and that is the dual string bow for now. There may be some other one in the future that can have like really high base crit chance, because as far as I'm aware of, they're all 5%. So there is not like a huge desire to go way higher in terms of like choosing something else, because it has like a high, like for example, this one over here. This one has an implicit hit at base damage as Chaos 100, which is interesting. So there are some hidden things, like if most of the armors in this game will give you reduced movement speed. It doesn't like tell you this. This is kind of weird. Path of Exile is more of a cryptic old school game where it's just like, you gotta know. Yeah, dual string bow is just absolutely king. As far as the helmets go, there is, again, the golden stuff doesn't exist, but like all attributes could be something to look at. But again, this is not, oh, by the way, I should probably mention this really quick. I'm not going to count any uniques here. I'm just talking about the best bases to go ahead and start crafting on. This one's basically the same thing as the armors. It is all about kind of knowing your stuff. But another thing I wanted to go over that is quite important to mention, if you want to, because the game doesn't show you, like you can type in implicits. Like if I wanted, let's say like fire res, I can type that in as an implicit. But one of the most annoying things with the search, and this is how you can get a big advantage in the game, is to simply buy things with a good base and a good implicit, and then you can kind of craft off this. And I wanted to make this video because originally I was going to start making my crafting guide video, but I think to know what the best base is first is going to be really key, because again, if you just select the implicit over here, this could be a pretty big deal to get that additional fire res, and then we can go the sum over here, and not only do we get all 72 in total of these two resistances, but we are also getting this. That implicit is always going to be there. Like a ruby ring will always have that fire res. A topaz ring will always have that additional lightning resistance. So if you want to start crafting on something, you definitely need to know kind of which ones are the best ones. And that was the point of this video. If there's any other really good implicits that you guys felt like I missed out on, definitely let me know down below. And we're going to be making crafting guides soon. But yeah, these are kind of like the go-tos for each of the categories in terms of like which ones is the best that I could recommend. Keep in mind, there's always niche builds that may not want very specific things, but for the most part, yeah, you're going to be one, like if you're like a bow player, I want to craft a good bow, you start off with the expert dual string bow. And then also another great tip is that in the reforge, you can take 3 of any item, and then if you maybe bricked 3 different crafts, you can basically get another chance at a craft by just RNGing them. So that's a great way if you are going to start crafting in the game to kind of get some sort of refund. But we're going to be making a crafting guide, and I wanted this out there so you can have the idea of kind of which ones are going to have like the most bang for the buck in terms of like crafting. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up. If you guys enjoyed it, drop a like on it. If you're new, sub and turn on the bell if you'd like to see more content. And check the pin for even more Path of Exile essentials. But those are the best bases.